My name is Nora Mercer. I am 38 years old, and not long ago I sat at the respondent's table in a county courtroom, while a lawyer wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first commercial oven called me a kidnapper. The three children I had raised for 12 years were described in his filings as my victims. Across the aisle, my older sister, Vanessa, lowered her face into a tissue and cried with such precision that half the courtroom seemed to lean toward her. She never actually used the tissue. She only held it carefully beneath her eyes, protecting her makeup while she told the judge I had stolen her family. 12 years earlier, Vanessa had driven into my driveway, unbuckled her three children, and asked me to watch them for 1 hour. 1 hour. I received 12 years of fevers, school forms, lunchboxes, asthma treatments, nightmares, science fairs, and emergency pancakes. Vanessa received a 12-year head start on a life without responsibility. Then, after our mother died and left money in trust for the children, my sister returned with fresh highlights, an expensive lawyer, and a petition claiming I had forged her signature and kept her children against her will. What she did not know was that inside my bag, beneath my wallet and checkbook, sat an 11-year-old manila envelope. It was sealed with yellowed packing tape, and the word Tulsa was written across one corner in my handwriting. I had spent more than a decade protecting the children from what was inside. By the end of the trial, that envelope would be opened by a judge in front of my entire family. To understand why I kept it sealed for so long, you have to go back to a Saturday morning in June. I was 26 then, renting a tired little house on Cherry Lane and working night shifts at a diner. The floors tilted slightly toward the kitchen, the back door stuck whenever it rained, and the second bedroom was filled with cookbooks, baking pans, and application forms for culinary school. I was saving every tip I could. I did not have much, but I had a plan. And at 26, a plan felt almost as solid as ownership. Vanessa's minivan pulled into my driveway at 9:15 that morning, with the muffler coughing loud enough to announce her before I saw her. She was 31, 5 years older than me, and had been widowed for 13 months. Her husband, Daniel, had died in a highway accident, leaving her with three small children and a grief none of us knew how to handle. Vanessa climbed out, carrying 1-year-old Lily against her hip. Lily's face was flushed with a low fever. 3-year-old Ethan looked half asleep even while standing, and 5-year-old Claire was carrying everyone's shoes as though she had already learned that if she did not keep track of things, no one else would. Behind them, Vanessa dragged 2 black garbage bags filled with clothes. She dropped them onto my porch with the careless finality of someone leaving donations outside a thrift store. She smelled of cigarettes and vanilla lotion, and she kept glancing toward the minivan while she spoke. She said she had an appointment she could not miss and could not bring the children with her. Then she pushed the diaper bag into my arms and gave me the smile that had rescued her from consequences since we were children. "Just 1 hour, Nor," she said. "I swear." I asked what kind of appointment happened on a Saturday morning. She was already backing down the steps. Vanessa said she would explain later, climbed into the minivan, and pulled away before I could ask anything else. Claire stood at the edge of the porch and waved until the van disappeared around the corner. Then she turned to me and asked whether I had popsicles. I did, so the afternoon became popsicles, cartoons, spilled juice, and Lily's fever finally breaking around 4. At 6, I called Vanessa. At 7, I called again. By 10 that night, I was standing at my front window with Lily asleep against my shoulder, watching headlights turn onto Cherry Lane. Every time light moved across the curtains, I thought the minivan had returned. Every set of headlights continued past my house. I left the porch light on all night. Vanessa did not come back on Sunday, her voicemail filled by Sunday evening. On Monday, her phone stopped ringing and went directly to a recorded message. I called the police because I still believed I was dealing with a missing person. A tired sergeant took down the information and explained that an adult was legally allowed to leave town. There was no obvious sign that Vanessa had been abducted or harmed, and she had left the children with a relative rather than alone. He told me to call again if I found evidence of danger or foul play. The closest thing I found to foul play was her apartment. Her landlord let me inside on Tuesday because Vanessa owed rent, and he hoped I might pay it. The apartment had not been burglarized. It had been emptied deliberately. The closets were bare. Even the hangers were gone. The crib had already been sold through a local classified listing. A neighbor across the hall told me a moving truck had arrived the previous Thursday. Vanessa had packed her life while I was working a double shift, then delivered her children to my porch as the final item on a moving checklist. My mother, Margaret, sat at my kitchen table later that week with her hands folded tightly in front of her. She said the sentence she would repeat for years. "She'll come back, Nora. She's their mother." Mom spoke as if motherhood were a law of nature, something permanent and automatic, like gravity. Part of me wanted to believe her. Daniel had been dead only 13 months. Grief can hollow people out and make them do things they would never otherwise do. Maybe Vanessa had panicked. Maybe she needed time. Maybe she believed she would return once she could breathe again. That was the story I told myself while buying a used car seat at a yard sale. A few nights later, I was tucking Claire into the fold-out couch in the room that had once held my culinary school plans. She looked up at me and asked, "Did we do something wrong?" She was 5 years old. She had already started trying to solve an adult's abandonment, as if it were a problem hidden inside her own behavior. "Sweetheart," I told her. "Somebody did something wrong, but it was never you." People sometimes ask how I became responsible for 3 children overnight. The honest answer is that I did it badly at first. Then I did it slightly less badly. Eventually, I woke up and realized I had been doing it for an entire year. I put my culinary school application in a drawer and accepted every diner shift I could get. I learned that Lily would only fall asleep if the dryer was running. I learned that Ethan wheezed whenever he cried too hard, and that a nebulizer cost far more than I expected, even with a coupon. I learned that lice treatment usually went on sale near the end of summer. I learned how to stretch ground beef across 2 dinners and how to recognize a fever by touching a forehead in the dark. Most importantly, I learned that shame was an expensive luxury, so I stopped purchasing it. I enrolled us in every assistance program for which we qualified. I stood in line for nutrition benefits beside women who looked exactly as exhausted as I felt. No one in that line demanded an explanation for where the children's mother had gone. My mother helped whenever she could, especially when I worked double shifts, and she loved those children fiercely. But Mom belonged to a generation that treated family trouble as something to be folded, hidden, and placed in the back of a closet. We did not say Vanessa had abandoned them. At church, Mom said Vanessa was traveling. For a while, I allowed the children to believe a softer version of that story, because the truth had teeth, and they were so small. The first serious obstacle was not money, it was a clipboard. When I tried to register Ethan for kindergarten, I reached a line near the bottom of the form that required the signature of a parent or legal guardian. I stood in the school office, holding a pen I had no legal right to use. She lowered her voice and slid the form back toward me. "You're going to need legal documents, honey." Legal documents required either a court order or Vanessa's cooperation. At that point, no one had heard from her in more than a year. The clipboard was a warning. The emergency room became a verdict. 14 months after Vanessa left, Ethan developed a chest cold that turned dangerous at 2 in the morning. His small ribs pulled inward with every breath. I drove him to the hospital while Claire held a blanket around him in the back seat, and Lily cried beside her. In the emergency department, a nurse asked whether I was his mother. I said no. She asked whether I was his legal guardian. Again, I said no. They treated him because it was an emergency, but while Ethan received a breathing treatment, a hospital social worker found me in the hallway. She carried a folder and spoke gently, which somehow made the situation feel even more frightening. She explained that I had no legal authority over the children. I could not reliably enroll them in school, add them to certain insurance plans, consent to non-emergency procedures, or make long-term decisions on their behalf. If anyone challenged the arrangement, or if the wrong agency received the wrong version of our situation, the children could be placed temporarily in foster care while the courts determined where they belonged, possibly in separate homes. I sat in the parking garage after sunrise, while Ethan slept against the car window. Claire and Lily had stayed with Mom, and for the first time since the minivan disappeared, I allowed myself to think beyond the next meal or shift. Loving the children was not enough. Staying was not enough. I needed the law to recognize that I existed. On Monday morning, I contacted a family attorney named Elena Morales. She reviewed what little documentation I had and explained that the most direct path was a legal custody order. The simplest version required Vanessa's signed consent. Without it, we would have to prove abandonment, while also locating and formally notifying her, a process that could take months and expose the children to uncertainty. No one in the family knew where Vanessa was, so I hired a private investigator. He charged $1,800, half in advance. I paid him with money that had been sitting in my culinary school account. 9 days later, he called and told me Vanessa was working at a lounge outside Tulsa under her maiden name. I arranged 2 days away from the diner, borrowed Mom's more reliable car, and drove nearly 900 miles. Vanessa agreed to meet at a roadside motel because she did not want me to know where she lived. After 14 months without a call, she walked into the room wearing acrylic nails, a costly jacket, and an expression that suggested our family was a hotel she had checked out of long ago. She looked healthier than I expected and more absent than I remembered. I placed the custody documents on the small table by the window. Elena had arranged for a mobile notary to arrive at 3. The packet contained duplicate originals, so one signed set could eventually be filed with the court and the second could remain in my records. Vanessa flipped through the pages as if she were reading a restaurant menu. She did not ask about Lily's fever. She did not ask whether Ethan's breathing had improved. She did not ask whether Claire was sleeping, eating, or still carrying everyone else's shoes. She asked, "What do I get?" That question changed something in me. Until then, some part of me still believed I had driven all that way to find my grieving sister. Sitting in that motel room, I understood that grief might explain why she had run, but it did not explain why she had spent 14 months refusing to ask whether her children were alive. Vanessa took a sheet of motel stationery and wrote down her condition in the looping handwriting our mother had always praised. I read it once, then again. My anger did not explode, it condensed. Something inside me became very quiet and stayed that way for years. She wanted $15,000. She would sign the custody papers if I paid her $15,000 and agreed not to look for her again. She was not asking for help with treatment, rent, or transportation. She was naming a price for the signature that would allow me to take her son to a doctor, enroll her daughters in school, and keep all 3 children out of foster care. I paid it. The money came from the account labeled Culinary School, the account I had built dollar by dollar from tips and double shifts. A wire was arranged that week, and I kept the receipt. At 3, the notary arrived, checked our identification, watched Vanessa sign both original sets, and applied her seal. I placed one set aside for filing and kept the duplicate original with the receipt and Vanessa's handwritten note. As I gathered the documents, Vanessa lit a cigarette near the open window. She smiled at me through the smoke. "You always wanted to play house with my kids," she said. "Congratulations." I stopped at the door and looked back at her. "I'm not playing anything," I said. "I'm just the one who stayed." I drove home through the night, with the signed documents on the passenger seat. When I reached Cherry Lane near midnight, the house was dark except for the hall light Mom had left on. I stood in the children's doorway and listened to them breathe. Claire was curled toward the wall. Ethan had kicked off his blanket. Lily's fist was closed around the corner of hers. I had purchased legal safety from the person who should have provided it for free. That autumn, the juvenile court granted me legal custody. My attorney filed the required signed document, while the second notarized original, the wire receipt, and Vanessa's note remained together. After the case was completed, I placed those 3 items into a manila envelope, sealed it with packing tape, wrote Tulsa across the corner, and locked it away. The following decade happened the way dough rises, slowly until suddenly the bowl is full. 5 years after Vanessa left, I attempted to terminate her parental rights so I could adopt the children. The process cost nearly $4,000. Vanessa surfaced long enough to hire a lawyer and object, then disappeared again after her attorney's limited involvement ended. With her location uncertain, further service attempts, hearings, and required evidence dragged on. Eventually, the case stalled and was dismissed before reaching a final decision. The law was built to be cautious about permanently severing a parent's rights, even when that parent treated the doorway as something she could enter and leave whenever convenient. I learned to sleep beside a door that never fully closed. Life became good anyway. 6 years before the trial, I opened the Hearthline Bakery using a small business loan and a second-hand industrial mixer I named Mabel. 5 years before the trial, I purchased the house on Cherry Lane. It was not a grand house, but the children had already survived one disappearance, and I did not want them to lose the place where their lives had finally become predictable. I packed thousands of lunches. I sat beside beds through stomach viruses and nightmares. I handled a broken wrist, 2 science fairs, braces, parent conferences, lost permission slips, and one middle school heartbreak that required pancakes at an unreasonable hour. The children called me Nor when they were little, then Aunt Nora when forms or strangers required an explanation. Around the house, I was usually just N. I never asked them to call me Mom. Love already had enough work to do, without being forced to audition for a title. Every June, however, a blank postcard appeared in my mailbox. There was never a message or signature. One showed a beach in Florida. Another showed a casino in Nevada. Another had a mountain covered in snow. The first postcard frightened me enough that I called Elena. There was little we could do about an unsigned card that contained no threat. After a few years, I stopped telling anyone when they arrived. I tied them together with a rubber band and placed them in the junk drawer. Someone knew our address. Someone was keeping track. Once a year, Vanessa reminded me she could find us, yet she never wrote a single word to the children. 8 months before the trial, my mother suffered a stroke at her kitchen table. She was 71. A crossword puzzle remained half-finished beside her, and the kettle was still warm when the ambulance arrived. At the funeral, Lily held my hand so tightly that my ring left a mark on my finger. I kept watching the church doors, thinking Vanessa might appear late because she had always been late to everything. She did not come. Mom's will was simple: her farmhouse at the edge of town, an insurance payout, and the money she had saved through a lifetime of rarely buying anything for herself were placed in a trust for her 3 grandchildren. The total cash value was a little over $312,000, separate from the farmhouse. The trust was intended for college, housing, and the beginning of the children's adult lives. I was named trustee. Vanessa's name appeared once in the will, in a sentence confirming that Mom had considered her and had intentionally chosen not to leave her a share. Probate law required notice to potential heirs, including those excluded by the will. A certified notice was sent to Vanessa's last known address and forwarded through whatever trail remained behind her. For 3 months, nothing happened. I handled the estate, maintained the farmhouse, organized the trust accounts, and documented every expense so carefully that Elena joked the records were cleaner than some bank audits. I allowed myself to believe the notice had disappeared into the same darkness as Vanessa. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, a rental car stopped outside the bakery. A woman stepped out wearing a white wool coat and oversized sunglasses. My hands recognized her before my face did. They went cold against the proofing tray I was holding. Vanessa entered as though she were a customer. 12 years had passed without a call, a birthday card, or a word at our mother's funeral. "Hello, Noor," she said. She looked polished and temporary at the same time. Expensive in the way rental cars are expensive. Beneath the salon hair and careful coat, she was still my sister. She had the same chin and the same habit of tilting her head whenever she wanted something. The morning rush had ended. It was only Vanessa, me, and the sound of the ovens. She began with a performance. Her eyes became wet at exactly the right moment. She said she had been sick. She said she had spent years getting better and was finally stable enough to become what her children needed. She claimed she had thought about them every day. I looked at her fresh manicure and thought about the blank postcards hidden in my kitchen drawer. "Where were you when Mom was buried?" I asked. For half a second, her expression failed. Then she chose not to answer. Instead, she leaned against my counter and lowered her voice. "I want my babies back." "Your babies?" I repeated. Claire is 17. Ethan was 15. Lily was 13 and working on pre-algebra homework in a bedroom I had painted twice. I felt anger rise into my neck, but I had spent 12 years learning how to set down feelings long enough to handle what was in front of me. I told Vanessa the children had school, routines, friends, medical histories, and a home. None of it would be renegotiated across a pastry display. If she wanted contact, she could speak to a lawyer and use the proper legal process. The moisture vanished from her eyes. "You'll hear from someone," she said. 1 week later, a process server arrived. The legal papers came in 2 layers. The first was a petition seeking custody and expanded parental control over all 3 children, though Claire was close to adulthood. Vanessa's lawyer was Grant Whitaker, a tall man who wrote court filings as if he were submitting headlines to a tabloid. The petition claimed the consent documents were forged. It described the previous 12 years as wrongful retention. In one paragraph, clearly designed to be repeated outside the courtroom, it suggested I had effectively kidnapped the children. The second filing challenged our mother's will. Vanessa claimed I had manipulated a sick, elderly woman into disinheriting her. That second case explained the first. If the will were invalidated, and the estate treated as though Mom had died without one, Vanessa could claim a substantial share of the farmhouse and money. The children's trust would be threatened. Custody was the emotional instrument. The estate was the financial target. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy parked outside the bakery during lunch and asked me questions about custodial interference. He was courteous, and the complaint was closed once he verified the custody order. Verification took only a few minutes. The cruiser remained outside long enough for half the town to see it. In a small community, facts travel on foot. Accusations use a car. I told the children on a Sunday evening over meatloaf. I had rehearsed the words in the shower. "Your mother is back in town. She has asked the court to review where you live and how contact should work. There will be a legal process. The adults will handle it, and nothing about tomorrow morning is changing." My voice remained calm. The children did not. Ethan shoved his chair backward hard enough to strike the wall. He said something about Vanessa that I will not repeat, then went outside and shot basketballs in the dark until the neighbor's porch light came on. Lily became very still. Her ears turned pink, the way they always did when she was struggling not to cry. "Does she want to meet us?" she asked. There was hope in her voice, exposed and dangerous. Lily had been 1 year old when Vanessa left. Her mother was not a memory. She was a character assembled from family photographs, softened explanations, and unanswered questions. Claire folded her arms and watched me. Later, after Ethan and Lily left the kitchen, she began stacking plates. "Why did she leave?" she asked. "The real reason." I gave her the explanation I had polished for years. "She got lost, sweetheart." "Some people get lost." Claire set a plate on the counter with deliberate care. "I'm not 5 anymore." N. She walked upstairs, leaving me beside a sink full of cooling water. That was when I understood 2 things. My family was about to be examined in public, and the story I had built to protect the children had begun to rot beneath us. The first hearing lasted 40 minutes. Grant Whitaker performed for at least 35 of them. He stood before Judge Samuel Bennett and described my life as a kidnapping, carried out gradually through paperwork and control. Elena placed the existing custody order into the record, along with confirmation that the deputy had closed the criminal complaint. That ended the most inflammatory criminal suggestion. A person cannot kidnap children through a custody arrangement a court has already approved. But family court did not end there. Vanessa was still their biological mother, and her allegation that the original consent had been forged required review. A signature cannot speak. It sits silently on a page while strangers assign motives to it. Judge Bennett ordered the disputed handwriting examined and appointed a guardian ad litem, Rachel Monroe, to represent the children's interests. Because the court had to evaluate Vanessa's request rather than assume the answer, it granted her supervised visitation for 2 hours each week at a family services center. 2 hours did not sound like much. After 12 years of having every hour, it felt like someone had drilled a hole into the bottom of our home. In the courthouse parking lot, Elena loosened her scarf and asked, "Besides the filed custody documents, do you have anything else from the day she signed? A letter, receipt, note, anything that confirms the circumstances?" I stared at a crack in the pavement. "I have something." She asked what kind of something. "Something I would rather never use." Elena studied my face. "Whatever it is, make sure it stays safe." I did not tell her that it had already spent 11 years inside a fireproof box, waiting for the exact accusation Vanessa had now made. The visitation room at the Family Services Center had toys, low furniture, and a large observation window. I stood on the other side while Vanessa met her children. She arrived with gifts that proved she had studied their social media pages. She brought Ethan the exact sneakers he had posted about. Lily received a sketchbook and the expensive pens she had been saving for. Claire received a vintage shirt from a band whose poster hung above her bed. Social media becomes a gift registry when someone has no shame about using it that way. Vanessa cried, at appropriate moments. She knew when to reach for the children and when to let them approach. Lily moved closer first and showed her drawings on her phone. Vanessa reacted to every image with perfectly measured delight. Ethan remained rigid for 20 minutes, then slowly softened because 15-year-old boys are not designed to resist the exact sneakers they want, while an attractive woman calls them tall and says she has missed them. Only Claire remained distant. She was polite, controlled, and observant, answering questions as though she were already giving testimony. Before Vanessa entered the room, I saw her standing alone in the hallway through another window. She did not know anyone was watching. Her hands were trembling. Twice, she pressed them flat against the front of her coat, trying to steady them. For a moment, something in my chest shifted. I wondered whether some part of her truly understood what she had lost. Then the visitation door opened. The trembling disappeared. Her smile arrived, and the performance began. Near the end of the visit, Vanessa leaned close to Claire and whispered something. On the drive home, I asked what she had said. "Nothing," Claire replied, looking through the window. It was not nothing. I knew that, but I did not push. Our town preferred simple stories. There was no story simpler than a mother returning for her children. At a church potluck, my mother's sister, Aunt Diane, cornered me near the dessert table. She was 68, carrying 2 casseroles and enough certainty for an entire congregation. "She is their mother," Diane announced loudly. "Blood is blood. What kind of woman keeps children away from their own mother?" Conversations along the folding tables stopped. Someone's fork remained halfway to her mouth. I could have answered with 12 years. I could have mentioned the garbage bags on my porch, Ethan struggling to breathe in an emergency room, or a junk drawer full of blank postcards. But blood is blood was not an argument. It was a hymn, and people in that room already knew the tune. I'm not their mother. I'm only the one who stayed. It did not feel like a victory. It was simply the only truth that fit into one breath. Within days, the bakery began to feel the town's opinion shifting. A wedding cake order was canceled without explanation. 2 one-star reviews appeared from accounts that had never reviewed another business. Regular customers who had greeted me for years began buying coffee elsewhere or avoiding my eyes. You cannot fight an entire town at once. People carry the version of a story that weighs the least. Then, Elena called and told me Grant had subpoenaed every record connected to the Children's Trust. He wanted statements, receipts, transfers, property records, and trustee reports. He is not only preparing a custody case, Elena said. He is taking inventory. That night, after all 3 bedroom doors had closed, I removed the gray fireproof box from the top shelf of my closet. It was dented on one corner and hidden behind winter blankets. Everything proving our family's legal existence was inside it. Birth certificates, the custody order with its raised seal, medical documents, school records, tax forms, and a hospital bracelet small enough to fit around 2 of my fingers. At the bottom lay the manila envelope. Tulsa. The paper had softened around the edges. The packing tape had turned amber. I knew every word inside without opening it, the way a person knows the shape of a scar beneath clothing. For 11 years, my reasoning had remained the same. The contents could prove that Vanessa had signed voluntarily and demanded money. They could also force 3 children to read their mother's price for leaving them. Once those words entered a court file, I could not take them back. A child might understand intellectually that the money purchased legal protection, not the child, but pain does not always respect logic. I returned the envelope to the bottom of the box, stacked the other records over it, locked the lid, and placed it behind the blankets. When I stepped into the hallway, blue light glowed beneath Claire's bedroom door. It was after 1 in the morning. 2 Saturdays later, I discovered who she had been messaging. I was delivering a sheet cake across town when I saw Claire through the front window of a diner. She sat in a corner booth. Across from her was Vanessa, wearing sunglasses indoors. No caseworker was present. It was an unsupervised meeting in direct violation of the court's order. A small, wrapped box rested on the table between them. Vanessa slid it across the surface with 2 fingers, moving it toward Claire like a piece on a chessboard. I did not storm into the diner. I walked inside, greeted both of them, and told Claire the cake in my van required another pair of hands. Vanessa did not argue. She leaned back and smiled as though she had expected me to arrive. That smile followed me into the parking lot. In the van, Claire held the wrapped box on her lap and stared straight ahead. She was 17, angry, frightened, and trapped between 2 versions of her childhood. She told me things, Claire said. I waited. She says you paid her 12 years ago. She says you gave her money to stay away because you wanted us for yourself. The road noise seemed to grow louder. That is how a carefully designed lie works. It contains one true bolt in the center, then bends every surrounding piece into the wrong shape. Money had moved between Vanessa and me once. She had taken the most desperate day of my life, removed its context, and given it to Claire as proof that her childhood had been purchased. Is it true? Claire asked. A simple yes would wound her. A no would be a lie, and she had studied my face since she was 5. Claire nodded slowly. That's not a no. We drove the rest of the way without turning on the radio. She did not open Vanessa's gift in front of me, but she carried it into the house. After that afternoon, something changed. Her bedroom door, once usually open, remained closed. She filtered every sentence before speaking and often decided not to speak at all. Silence charges interest. On Monday, I told Elena about the unauthorized meeting. She immediately said we could report it to the court. Vanessa had arranged contact behind the caseworker's back, violated a direct order, and used the meeting to influence Claire with gifts and allegations. That matters, Elena said. It could seriously damage her credibility. Reporting it would require a statement. Claire might be interviewed, questioned, or asked to describe the conversation. Vanessa had spent years using the children as tools when convenient. I was not willing to turn Claire into an exhibit simply because doing so might help me win. I told Elena not to file it. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. You are making my job much harder, she said. Unfortunately, you are also making it difficult for me not to respect you. Then, she leaned forward. But we need other evidence, Nora. You keep telling me it exists. I still could not bring myself to open the envelope. On the first Sunday of each month, I visited the cemetery. I cleaned Mom's stone, then Daniel's because someone should. The children usually came on birthdays and holidays, but the monthly visits were mine. That Sunday, a thin, cold rain fell across the cemetery. I was walking along the gravel path carrying carnations when I saw someone kneeling at Daniel's grave. Vanessa. She wore flat shoes and held a cheap gas station umbrella. There was no lawyer, audience, or expensive coat. I stopped beneath a maple tree before she heard me. Vanessa was crying in a way I had never seen during the court proceedings. It was messy, physical grief, the kind that does not protect makeup. She spoke to Daniel's headstone. I caught only fragments at first. She said she was sorry. She said she had been unable to breathe inside their house after the accident, with 3 babies crying and his boots still beside the door. Then I heard one complete sentence. After the first year, there was no version of me coming back that didn't make me a monster, so I stayed gone. I stood beneath the tree, while rain gathered on the carnations. For one long moment, I saw the story from inside her skin. She had been 31, widowed, overwhelmed, and raised to expect someone else to rescue her. Daniel died, no rescuer appeared, and she ran. Shame then became another wall. The longer she stayed away, the more impossible returning must have felt. I nearly stepped forward. I nearly said her name the way I had when we were girls. Then Vanessa stood, brushed mud from her knees, and looked down at Daniel's name. That house should have been half mine, she said. Mom owed me that. Her voice had changed back. She adjusted her collar and walked toward the rental car. I remained beneath the maple until she drove away. Then, I placed the carnations on Daniel's grave and stopped feeling guilty about the evidence I might have to use. My deposition took place in a conference room with weak coffee and fluorescent lights. Grant Whitaker questioned me for 2 hours, cutting the story into small pieces. When had the children come into my care? Had I ever prevented Vanessa from contacting them? Had I benefited from managing my mother's estate? Had I influenced the will? Did I consider myself the children's mother? Had I wanted children of my own? Then, without changing his tone, Grant asked, "Miss Mercer, did you ever pay my client money?" The room became completely still. Elena's pen stopped moving. Under oath, the truth does not pause to ask whether it will be used honestly. "Yes," I said. Grant allowed the word to sit between us. $15,000, correct? Transferred while she was living out of state? I said yes. He smiled. No further questions today. I watched his version of the story assemble itself. A lonely younger sister, who wanted a family, had located a grieving widow through a private investigator. She had offered money, obtained a signature, and encouraged the mother to disappear. Then she had performed martyrdom for 12 years. Every fact belonged to my life. Every connection between them had been rewired to carry the opposite meaning. In the parking lot, Elena remained quiet for several moments. "The evidence you have been protecting," she said. "Does it explain that payment?" I told her it explained everything. "Then you understand what happens if we do not use it," she said. Vanessa has already told Claire her version. Grant placed the payment under oath. The question is no longer whether the children hear about it. The question is whose explanation reaches them first. The next morning, Elena laid out the choices on a legal pad. Option 1 was to disclose the envelope. It would rebut the forgery allegation, explain the transfer, and likely destroy Vanessa's credibility in both cases. It would also become evidence. Court records are difficult to hide permanently. Reporters, neighbors, or the children themselves could eventually obtain copies. Option 2 was to keep it sealed and defend the case through 12 years of school records, medical documents, witness testimony, and proof of stability. Those records showed what I had done, but they did not directly disprove Vanessa's claim that her original signature was forged or coerced. Elena did not tell me what to choose. A responsible lawyer does not pretend painful decisions have painless answers. That same week, Rachel Monroe, the guardian ad litem, visited our home. She wore sensible shoes, carried a canvas tote, and observed details without commenting on them. She saw the growth chart penciled inside the pantry door, the framed school photographs, the shelf of ribbons, and the repaired mark in the wall where Ethan's chair had struck during the conversation about Vanessa. Rachel interviewed each child privately in the living room. The door remained slightly open, according to protocol, while I stood in the kitchen, trying not to listen. Ethan finished in 8 minutes. Claire took 20 and emerged with her jaw set. Lily remained inside for almost half an hour. When she came out, she held her sketchbook tightly against her chest and found me by the sink. "Did our mom ever try to come back?" she asked. "Even once?" The sentence I had used for years rose automatically. "She got lost. It would not leave my mouth." Claire stood in the doorway watching me. One more softened answer would cost both girls something I could not repair. Before I responded, the mail arrived. A certified letter from Grant's office contained a confidential settlement proposal. It was the most honest document Vanessa had sent because it contained numbers instead of tears. She offered to withdraw the custody petition and abandon the challenge to Mom's will. She would sign a complete surrender of her parental rights and consent to adoption. In exchange, she wanted $80,000 from me personally. She also demanded that I resign as trustee so a neutral corporate fiduciary would manage the children's money. Elena read the offer twice. "It may be the cheapest piece she will ever sell you," she said. She was right. $80,000 would consume most of my savings, the bakery's available credit, and a large portion of my home equity. It was painful, but technically possible. In return, the cases would end, the children could remain in my care, adoption would finally be available. Lily could keep believing her mother had been ill and lost, rather than calculating the price Vanessa once demanded to leave. The envelope could remain sealed until I died. All I had to do was repeat the decision I had made 11 years earlier at more than 5 times the cost. Pay Vanessa. Purchase silence. Call that silence protection. Then hope she did not return in another 5 or 10 years with a new price. I asked Elena for one night. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook open beneath the lamp. I had already calculated the numbers on the back of a bakery invoice. A second mortgage, the business credit line, and my savings would barely cover the settlement. My hand knew how to write the check. It had participated in this arrangement before. Near midnight, the stairs creaked. Claire entered, wearing an old robe, and sat across from me. She looked at the checkbook, then at the settlement letter I had failed to hide. She understood the entire decision within seconds. "That's what she really wants," Claire said. It was not a question. I did not insult her by pretending otherwise. "If you pay her again," she continued, "she'll come back again. You know that, right?" Again. The word settled between us as though it had always lived in our kitchen. Claire had understood since the diner that money had been paid. She had been waiting to see what I would do with the truth this time. Then she said the sentence that ended 11 years of secrecy. "Stop protecting me from my own life, N." She stood, squeezed my shoulder the way I squeezed hers whenever she was sick, and returned upstairs. I remained at the table long enough to be certain my decision did not come from anger. Then I closed the checkbook. At 3 in the morning, I stood in my closet doorway, looking at the gray box behind the blankets. At 9, I placed it on Elena's desk. The metal was still cold from the trunk of my car. "No settlement," I said. "I bought her silence once. It expired. I am not renting my family back 1 decade at a time." I unlocked the box and removed the envelope marked Tulsa. For the first time in 11 years, I described every item inside to another person. The duplicate original consent, notarized and signed in blue ink. The receipt for the $15,000 transfer. Vanessa's handwritten demand. Elena did not touch the envelope immediately. Lawyers understand paper the way bakers understand heat. She knew what it could create and what it could destroy. Then, she explained the consequences again. Once disclosed, Grant would receive copies. Once introduced as evidence, it could become part of the public record. Requests to restrict access might fail. One day, the children would read the note, either because they chose to or because someone placed it in front of them. "They will hear every word from me before a courtroom tells them," I said. We rejected the settlement before noon. Grant's response arrived that afternoon. "We will see you at trial. Bring the alleged forgery." I read the message twice while standing alone in the bakery after closing. The chairs were upside down on the tables. The ovens were cooling. I felt something inside me settle into place. It was the clean, final sensation of a door closing. For 11 years, I had guarded a secret. Now I was simply ahead of its arrival. Rachel Monroe submitted her report 1 week before trial. Elena read the most important sections over the phone. Rachel found that the children were deeply bonded to me, that my home was the only stable home Ethan and Lily remembered, and that removing them would cause serious emotional harm. She recommended continuing the existing custody arrangement. I began breathing normally again. Then Elena paused. "There is another sentence," she said. Rachel had written that my persistent lack of transparency regarding Vanessa's departure was a concern. A woman had spent one afternoon in our house and placed her finger on the exact structural weakness I had spent 11 years refusing to inspect. I did not argue with the conclusion. A level does not insult a wall. It only reveals where the wall leans. 2 nights before trial, Claire announced that she planned to attend court. I told her absolutely not. She reminded me that she was 17, the courtroom was public, and she had no classes that day. Mrs. Parker next door could stay with Ethan and Lily, but no one could legally make Claire remain home. I looked at the girl I had raised on my cooking, my rules, and my silences. The final thing I wanted to protect her from was watching me stop protecting her. "All right," I said. I ironed her best blouse anyway. The night before trial, I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed with the sealed envelope in my lap. Through the wall, I heard Lily's white noise machine playing ocean sounds, the same recording she had used since she was 4. In a matter of hours, the mother she had imagined would collide with the mother whose handwriting waited beneath my hand. I had once believed withholding the truth was an act of courage. That night, I understood it had also been fear. The county courtroom smelled of old wood, paper, and radiator dust. A ceiling fan clicked every third rotation. Judge Samuel Bennett presided from the bench. Several townspeople occupied the gallery, having apparently decided their errands could wait. Claire sat in the second row wearing her ironed blouse. Her hands were folded, and her spine was straight. Vanessa took the stand in a dove-gray suit. For 40 minutes, she delivered the finest performance of her life. She said she had been ill and touched her collarbone in a way that invited everyone else to imagine the diagnosis. She claimed she had spent years recovering, becoming stable, and attempting to return to her children. Then she looked toward me and told the story Grant had been constructing for months. Her younger sister had always wanted the life Vanessa possessed. I had located her when she was grieving and vulnerable, offered money, taken her children, and threatened her when she tried to return. She paid me to disappear, Vanessa said. When I would not stay away, she used the children against me. Then, Grant showed her the filed consent. That is not my signature, Vanessa said. She cried carefully into the unused tissue. I watched members of the gallery lean toward her. For the first time, I fully accepted that she might win enough of the argument to damage us badly. She had blood, tears, and a story that required less effort to understand than mine. She was betting that a mobile notary from 11 years earlier would be difficult to locate, and that the duplicate original no longer existed. Most of all, she was betting on my silence. When Grant finished, he returned to his table with the expression of a man who believed the finish line was one step away. Your witness, he told Elena. Elena began with the legal record, the custody order, school enrollment documents, medical files, insurance forms. She established that Vanessa had provided no financial support, made no documented request for regular contact, and sent no birthday cards, letters, or direct messages. Then I took the stand. Elena guided me through the history carefully. The Saturday morning, the garbage bags, the abandoned apartment, Ethan's hospital visit, the private investigator, and the trip to Tulsa. She did not ask about the envelope yet. Grant approached for cross-examination with a pleasant expression. He asked whether I had struggled to build a family of my own, whether I had wanted children, whether I had used a private investigator to locate Vanessa during a period of grief, whether I had arrived with legal documents prepared, whether money had changed hands. Each question placed another brick into the wall he wanted the judge to see. Finally, Grant stopped in front of the witness stand. Isn't it true, Miss Mercer, that you bought yourself 3 children for $15,000? She leaned slightly forward, watching me with the same steady expression she had worn at the kitchen table when she told me to stop protecting her from her own life. Then I looked at Judge Bennett. No, sir, I said. And I would like the court to examine the documents that explain exactly what that money was for, Grant objected. Elena was already standing with the exhibit list. The envelope had been disclosed before trial, described in the filings, and contested through pretrial motions. Judge Bennett overruled the objection and allowed Elena to proceed through my testimony. It is an envelope I sealed 11 years ago, I explained. It contains documents from the day my sister signed the custody consent in Tulsa. I kept it sealed because I knew what the contents would do to the children if they ever read them. A bailiff carried the envelope toward the bench. Every person in the courtroom watched it move. I found Vanessa's face. The color had drained from it. For 11 years, she had treated my silence like a permanent asset. She was watching its value disappear. She asked me for 1 hour. I told the judge. I gave her children 12 years. The rest of what happened that day is in that envelope. Judge Bennett put on his reading glasses and opened the envelope with a letter opener. 3 items came out. The first was the retained duplicate original of the notarized consent, signed in blue ink and bearing the notary's seal. It matched the filed document Vanessa had accused me of forging. The second was the transfer receipt showing $15,000 sent from the savings account I had labeled culinary school. The third was the sheet of motel stationery, in Vanessa's handwriting. Judge Bennett read it silently. You want the papers? 15,000. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Do not come looking for me again. Tell them I'm dead if that makes it easier. V. The courtroom was silent. But courtrooms are often silent. This was different. This was the silence of people watching a judge read a mother's price for abandoning her children. Judge Bennett read the note twice. His eyes returned to the first line and moved down more slowly the second time, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less terrible. They did not. He removed his glasses and looked at Vanessa for several seconds. Vanessa looked toward the exit. Then he turned to me. Miss Mercer, he asked, do the children know what is written here? Claire leaned forward in the second row. Not all of it, I said. Judge Bennett held my gaze. He understood that the document was legally useful and personally devastating. He recessed the court for lunch and ordered the exhibit admitted. Then he said the afternoon proceedings could wait until the family had been given time to speak privately. There was a small conference room near the courtroom with a wobbly table and a window painted shut. That room was where my family truly changed. Mrs. Parker brought Ethan and Lily from school after I called. Claire paced near the wall. I placed copies of the 3 documents face down on the table and rested my hand over them. Then I told the truth. I had postponed for 11 years. I explained the school form I could not sign, and the emergency room hallway where I learned love did not give me legal authority. I told them about hiring the investigator, driving to Tulsa, meeting Vanessa in the motel, and arranging for the notary. I explained that 2 original sets had been signed, one for the custody case and one for my records. I told them about the postcards. One every June, proving their mother had known our address the entire time. Then I told them about the money. Vanessa demanded $15,000 before she would sign the papers, I said. I paid it from the money I had saved for school. None of them moved. I did not pay to own you. I paid because Ethan needed medical care. All 3 of you needed legal protection, and without her signature, the court process could have left you in uncertainty. But I was afraid that if you heard money had changed hands, you would believe what she later told Claire. I was afraid you would think you had been purchased. I turned the documents over. The children read Vanessa's note. Lily made a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. She folded into Ethan's shoulder, and he held her while staring at the wall, his jaw working as though he were chewing through something bitter. Claire remained standing. She read the note twice, placed it carefully on the table, and looked at me. You let me spend 12 years wondering what I did wrong. Her voice was quiet. A shout would have hurt less. You knew she chose to leave, and you let me think maybe we weren't good enough for her. I did not defend myself because she was right. In that room, I finally saw the second reason I had kept the envelope sealed. I had been protecting the children, but I had also been protecting myself from watching their faces change. I had treated the truth as though it belonged to me because I had been the adult carrying it. It was your truth, I said. I should have found a way to tell you sooner. I was afraid, and I called that fear protection. I am sorry it took a courtroom to make me honest. I slid the copies toward Claire. You decide when Lily is ready to read anything else connected to the case. You and Ethan can help her. Not me, not a judge, and not Vanessa. Lily wiped her face against her sleeve. Did you ever want to give us back? She asked. Not for 1 hour, I said. The afternoon session lasted less than an hour. With the duplicate original, the notary's seal, the transfer record, and the handwritten demand admitted into evidence, the forgery allegation collapsed. A handwriting examiner was available, but Grant no longer wanted the court to hear from that expert. After a whispered discussion at counsel table, Vanessa withdrew her claim that the signature was false and acknowledged on the record that she had signed the consent. That concession meant she could no longer separate herself from the note or the payment. Judge Bennett denied her custody petition. He found that the children had been abandoned and that removing them from the only stable home they knew would be profoundly harmful. He did not base the decision on one dramatic page. He cited 12 years of records, Vanessa's lack of support or meaningful contact, Rachel's report, and the evidence showing that Vanessa had voluntarily signed the custody documents. 12 years without a phone call, financial support, or a birthday card. is not a temporary absence, he said. It is a decision renewed, day after day. He said the word decision with more force than any gavel. The will challenge did not survive much longer. Once Vanessa's credibility collapsed and the record established her financial motive, she had no evidence that I had manipulated Mom. Her legal team withdrew the unsupported allegations, and the probate court left the trust intact. There were no handcuffs. No one was dragged from the courtroom. In the hallway afterward, Vanessa approached us with Grant walking several steps behind. She slowed when she reached Claire. Claire stood very straight, wearing Mom's posture and the blouse I had ironed. Vanessa opened her mouth. Whatever she intended to say did not come out. She turned toward me instead. For 2 seconds, the performance disappeared. She looked tired, 43 years old, holding her purse with both hands. "You were always better at keeping things than I was," she said. "Even them." Then she walked through the courthouse doors into the June sunlight. All 3 children watched her leave. Not one moved toward her. 6 weeks later, Elena used the abandonment finding and Rachel's recommendation to renew the process of terminating Vanessa's parental rights and beginning adoption proceedings for Ethan and Lily. This time, no one appeared to contest it. Certified notices were delivered through an address connected to a Nevada mail center and signed for by someone whose name we did not recognize. Claire turned 18 that October. Legally, she had aged out of the custody dispute. One Sunday evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and slid a printed page in my direction. "File one for me too," she said. She had researched adult adoption herself, opening the usual number of browser tabs and highlighting the requirements. "And change my last name while we're doing it." I looked at her, unable to speak. Claire glanced down at her hands. "You aren't only the one who stayed, N. You're my mom. The paperwork is just late." The paperwork was 12 years late. I signed it with an unsteady hand. No one at the table held that against me. The gray box no longer lives hidden behind blankets. It sits unlocked on a shelf near the kitchen. Most of the original evidence belongs to the court record now. Claire keeps copies of the documents in a safe place where Lily will not find them accidentally. She speaks with Lily's therapist about what should be shared and when. That decision belongs to them. We no longer keep one another's truths locked away in this house. We simply keep one another. The following June, a letter arrived addressed to all 3 children. The handwriting was Vanessa's, and the postmark was from Nevada. I did not open it. I did not hold it up to the light, hide it, or decide whether they were ready. I placed it on the kitchen table beside the bills and told them what it was. Then I left the room. Through the closed door, I heard the 3 of them speaking quietly. They made the decision together. Eventually, the envelope was placed unopened in the junk drawer beside the blank postcards and the ribbon-wrapped gift from the diner. Perhaps they will open it someday. Perhaps they will not. That choice is theirs. Vanessa asked me for 1 hour on a porch I still sweep every morning. That hour lasted 12 years. It carried us through court orders, hospital corridors, thousands of lunches, and one sealed envelope that nearly broke the family it ultimately protected. The children know the truth now, and they are still here. Blood may explain where someone came from, but it does not decide where that person belongs. Family is built by the people who stay through the fevers, the forms, the silence, and the moments when honesty costs more than comfort. It is written in school records, medical charts, grocery lists, and names packed into thousands of lunchboxes. For years, I believed my greatest act of love was keeping the children from the truth about their mother. I was wrong. Staying made me their family. Telling them the truth allowed us to remain one.